Hey guys, Ashley here. Welcome back to another episode of the Uninformed redesign, where today we're getting around to finishing off the BMW iX, a car that I was really disappointed with, and I think we all were, to be honest. It had so much promise from the BMW iNext concept that we saw and was released a year or so ago, and the final product just did not deliver on any of the promises that it seemed to pose. So in this episode, I'm going to see what I can do in terms of tweaking this. Now, I didn't want to make too many alterations because my intention or my hope for this BMW direction, this new form language that they're going for, is something that I hope will grow on myself and others. I trust BMW to know what they're doing in the long run. I think it's just going to take some time for us to adjust. But there are alterations that I wanted to make on this vehicle that I think would give it back just a slight hint of its DNA from BMW DNA. And that mainly stems with, at first, identifying what I thought it was lacking. And that was form. The front end was extremely flat, dull, unemotional. Had no excitement or drama in that front end, which a BMW was always known for. You always used to have the shark nose and the dynamic headlights with the strong eyelids that I tried to replicate again back on the M3 version of my redesign, and I wanted to bring that again into this. It just lacked that excitement, so that was my intention for this, and to give back what I think the iNext promised, which was a nice amount of form and dynamic range to some of the surfaces on this front end and the rest of the vehicle, to be honest. So yeah, my intention was for this front end to create something that was much more prominent. Its features were loud and bold, just like a BMW should be, defined. You can clearly see the differentiation between the forms, something that wasn't convoluted, and I feel wasn't trying to hide any features that it was unsure about. The BMW, I think, so far in this transition of design have definitely been quite coy when it comes to their features. Clearly not confident. I say clearly, but to me, it's perceived as not having confidence in their design language and forms that they're creating, because, again, everything is very vague. I think the contrast in horizontal, vertical, and angular lines are there purely to confuse and throw off people's eyes. Usually as a line and surfaces are meant to speak to each other quite harmoniously and follow on through each of the forms and elements, from the front to the side all the way to the rear, and there's not much on this vehicle or any of the BMWs that have come out in the past couple of months that actually do that. And I want to create something that, again, would try and emulate that in any way possible. And I've gone for these very stark, upright, and prominent kind of U-shape, or C-shape, shall I say, features. It tucks everything in. The slats that you see here at the moment are being covered in white, give a nice tied-in, tucked effect. You've got the very prominent grille in the middle, which takes up all of that space, but I think it's quite easy to lose the features towards the outside of the bumpers, the further away you push them. And obviously you want to make most of all the retail space that you have when it comes to design. And that was the purpose of those, to give them an end, so they go no further than that, a definitive end point. And as they tuck under towards the L shape, just, again, ties them all through to the middle, wraps it round, and gives it a start and a finishing point. I wanted to incorporate as much from the iNext as possible, and that would be those, obviously, C-shape features either side. They have very sharp and crisp lines on their front bumper to fender panels. But also, and I think what most importantly on this vehicle, it was lacking undulation and dynamic form around the headlights. They were very much plonked on, perched forward, right towards the nose, and I don't know, it didn't balance the vehicle well enough, in my opinion, whereas the iNext had, although they were perched right on the front, there was some a nice slant and rake to the headlights, as they wrapped around the fender all the way to the A-pillar. And I wanted to bring that back. It wrapped, and I was talking about it, wrapped the front and tied it in nicely with the side features and the panels. It pushed the eyes slightly back, giving it that eyelid again, and that inset feel as though it was really scowling and squinting at you, which is what you want when you're being followed by a BMW. Well, you don't want it when you're being followed by a BMW, but you know that vehicle, that the BMW is behind you, and therefore you want to get out of its way, and that's what BMW is about. It's about presence and about theatre and drama, and the iNext didn't have it, and this is my answer to try and get that back for them. Moving on to side panel, as you can see, I've started to try and implement a shoulder line, which is usually prominent throughout most of the BMWs. And again, this was something that this vehicle was seriously lacking. I actually don't mind the features, the squarer features over the wheels, the new wheel arch forms. It doesn't bother me too much. However, it was the form and the shape in between that I think really lacked personality and direction. It always got a little bit lost, and the weight between those wheels was vast. And I think adding a shoulder line through there just broke that up a little bit more, took the weight out between the greenhouse and the ground, and just again breaking that light and surfaces up just gives it, in my opinion, a sportier look, which I think what BMW have always been pro of. So I don't know why they didn't do it for this. And you might be wondering why I'm sticking with this front end grille, and you'll see that I'll make some tweaks and alterations to it. And I know the large grille itself is probably not the main talking point anymore in this vehicle, but the problem that most people are having with BMWs in general is that their new direction with this grille. Now, I am fully on board. I don't like this front end grille. However, I'm all for change and progression, and it must happen in design. Otherwise, we will not progress. You have to make changes and things that might not work, and choices that won't be fond or of popular choice. But in order to find your next path in a new direction, these changes have to be made in the long term. And I have full faith that they will find a happy medium, or ultimately we will just come to know it just as we have. They've gone from the very thin vertical slats of the earlier generations to what they had in the previous F90s, F80s, whichever it was. And now we have this. We're just going to have to deal with it, and I'm pretty sure there are those out there that who like it. Those I definitely know who don't, but what's the harm in trying to embrace it, And my intention to kind of help that transition was just by dulling it down. I think some might think it's slightly counterintuitive of my opinion in terms of, if you're going to embrace it, why not make it big and bold? And you definitely ground for being right there. However, I think with the vast majority of people opposing this design, I think it would have been better to implement the form, but keep the graphic features for options and choices. I wouldn't have put that on the press release car. I would have created something more to what I have done here, something that shows the form, shows off the features, but is subdued and a bit less aggressive on the eyes. And we finally get around to these headlights, something that probably baffles me most about this vehicle. Again, direction change and progression in design, I'm all for, but losing the halo headlights in a BMW is sacrilege, in my opinion. I don't know why they thought it was a good idea to take them off this model, but I wasn't happy. I wasn't ready to let them go, so I brought them back in a slightly angular way, again, just to link back with the features on the front end. And there you have it. That's kind of my front end. We now move on to the side view to give you a better idea of what it was that I was working on, or how I changed the form. And I'll be upfront here. Looking back at it now, I probably would have preferred to have created this shoulder line more in keeping and more parallel with that of the bottom kind of white strip feature at the bottom of the DLO. I think it would have been a bit more had a bit more continuity throughout the design. However, I still think the sharp rake upwards and it kind of almost meeting at a point eventually gives it again a sense of speed and emotion. But I think on second opinion and second chance, I would have probably lowered that rear point to kind of marry and couple with that lower DLO a little bit more. But I think the premise and the purpose of this shoulder line is still very much applicable in this render. This light catcher, again here, just to break up that feature, there was a slightly smaller one, but it was completely opposite to this. I felt it added weight to that rear arch, which I didn't want any more of. So I took the weight out of the feature, and you can kind of see it just breaks up the large chunk of surface just there, and a bit more depth with this shadow, and just punching in those door shut lines there, just to emphasize the kinks. Getting rid of that vulgar, ridiculous protrusion of a fake, I don't even know what it would be. I guess it would be trying to emulate an exhaust. I just wanted to subtly round this off, just to complement again the soft forms on the rear. Nothing too complex or complicated here. And I'm not going to change the rear end on this video. You won't see there was enough in there that I actually really liked and wouldn't have changed. And it was literally just that rear fake exhaust area that needed alteration. And moving on to the front, you can see from the sketch lines, the sheer amount of form and dynamism that you get from just the lines that I've drawn in general compared to the original, which was so flat and mundane. The way I've tried to kind of emulate the light catching these surfaces, I think just adds so much more to this form and element. It was such a washboard of a front end with very little in the way of emotion, which again, like I've said so many times in this video, is so unusual for a BMW. I don't quite know why they're going so drastic with their simplistic and minimalism form, but I'm sure we'll find out in due course. But this, I think, just helped, again, break up that large feature that was the front end. It might not be 100% accurate looking at it now in some areas, but I think the most improvement here is definitely the headlights. You'll see me just punch in these little features, which I think make all the difference. If I'd had a little bit more time, I would have gone into more depth with the complexity of these features, but for purposes, I think I'll stick with this. And while I let the final thing play out, I will let you know that I am thinking of changing up this platform. I know a lot of you follow me on my Instagram channel for, I guess, from designs from the ground up, whether it be my sketches or my Photoshop renders in general. And I think this, in terms of photo manipulation, isn't what I'm about. It's not what I do, and therefore I think it's a bit disingenuous of what I like to do with design. So I think going forward, you're going to see much more of redesigns from the ground up. It will be very much looking at comparisons and trying to work them out and work the kinks out, but I'm going to go through the process of sketching from scratch my own redesign of a vehicle, and then rendering it in my own style, in my own method, and that way hopefully you guys can probably get a bit more out of the design process and design thinking as I speak through it fully, rather than just touching up photographs. But until then, I hope this suffices, and I hope you like the improvements. If not, let me know what you would have changed on my designs. I know it's not going to be for everyone, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Once again, thanks guys for following, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.